Hello, welcome to our last episode of Rewatchers on the Wall covering Game of Thrones. Thank you for listening. Just a couple things I wanted to say before we get to the episode. We were finally not lazy, and we now have an email and a Twitter account. The email is rewatchersonthepod@gmail.com, and our Twitter handle is just at rewatchersonthepod. So if you'd like to send us anything, talk to us about Game of Thrones, we're about to start Twin Peaks. If you have any thoughts on that, anything, please reach out to us, send it to us. If not, also cool. But yeah, I hope you enjoy the episode, and we will look forward to seeing you later. Bye.
Winter is coming.
Where are my dragons?
In the Game of Thrones, you either win or you die.
The things I do for love.
A Lannister always pays his debts.
Chaos is a ladder.
Hodor.
You know nothing, Jon Snow.
We
are the Rewatchers on the Wall.
What brings people together?
Can't do it.
Not flags. Not blood. Stories. A good story can unite a kingdom. And who has a better story than the boy who lived? Dropped on his aunt and uncle's unforgiving porch after an attempted murder. Forced to live under stairs, for God's sake. With no birthdays and ill-fitting clothes. Until his 11th birthday.
Oh, shit.
That's all I got.
3 hours later.
And then he sees the ghost of his old teacher who tells him the secrets he needs to defeat evil. We're talking about Game of Thrones, obviously.
Yeah.
Welcome to Rewatchers on the Wall. I'm Tyler Harris with normal hosts Tyler McKinley and Riley Harris. Mitchell Marshall is out on assignment. Don't know why I said that.
I mean, a lady never asks and a gentleman never tells.
So we gotta.
The replacement is back.
The replacement. Tyler's neighbor. I think is how we referred to Justin up until this point.
Yeah.
The neighbor.
It was kind of last minute. We went over there. He was in his basement in his underwear, just like smashing Doritos with a hammer. It was really weird. But we dragged him out, and now he's here.
And
So glad to be back.
Yeah, we're glad to have you, and especially on this momentous night of endings, the last episode of Game of Thrones. Allegedly, who knows?
Yeah.
The twist they've thrown at us this far, I wouldn't be surprised to see a new episode next week. Actually, I would be. That would be very shocking. But yeah, let's just get right into it. How is everyone feeling?
Not great.
I believe your words when we got down here were, I hated it.
I'm upset.
Oh, okay. I want to die. Was that what you said?
Yeah. But I say that about a lot of things. So,
Right, yeah. That's basically a catchphrase at this point.
Yeah.
Elaborate on that.
Yeah.
What? Well, I have a feeling that most of us know what the most upsetting part of this will be for you, but what was upsetting to you?
Bran. He was gone for a whole season, and they're like, oh, he can be the king. No, he can't. He's a piece of shit. I hate him.
Long may he live. Long may he live.
Whoa. That's the king of the 6 kingdoms you're talking about there.
The Broken Boy, or whatever his title is.
Toy Broken
Bran
Boy
the
Soldier.
Broken.
Bran the Broken, yeah.
Oh, good old, yeah.
I hate that more than anything.
Yeah, it's not great. I feel like we could repeat almost all of the criticisms we've had for just about every episode of this season up to this point, and they would still hold pretty true for this because it definitely inherited all of the problems of everything that came before it. But I will say overall, I'm less disappointed than I expected to be.
Mm-hmm.
But still disappointing. I mean, it still is what it is. You know what I mean? It's still this season of Game of Thrones. So,
I don't know if it's that my expectations because of this shitty season were so abysmally low that I was going into this just being like, I really didn't care at all tonight. I was like going into being like, man, they could have like aliens come down and like just destroy everything and that'd be the end, and I would be okay with it. So I am, and maybe it's just because of that, I am like actually pretty okay and happy with considering how crappy everything was up to this point of how it came together and what they decided to end with. That being said, I think a lot of the choices that were made, particularly Bran, which I actually really like that choice based on seasons 1 through 4. I like, it's a very cool idea that the boy who was pushed out of that window is now like the king of the Six Kingdoms. That's going to throw me off. But yeah, like we've said, not enough was done, which is a theme for a lot of things this season. Not enough was done to make that a good choice.
Right. I just remembered, let's go ahead for our dedicated listeners who don't watch Game of Thrones, of which I'm sure there are many. Let me tell you everything that happened. I totally forgot. Let me tell you everything that happened in the final episode of Game of Thrones so you can have annoying conversations with everyone you work with. All right. Season 8, Episode 6, series finale of Game of Thrones. Tyrion, Davos, and Jon confirm that King's Landing is a gaping hole in the ground. Grey Worm executes Lannister men in the streets. Tyrion attempts to hold a Lannister family reunion. Arya finally stumbles out of the dust that was a city. Dany monologues about giving everyone in the world the mandatory gift of freedom. Tyrion steps down his hand to the Queen and is put on death row. Arya attempts to pry Jon's dumbass eyes open to the reality of the situation. Jon visits Tyrion, and Tyrion attempts to pry Jon's dumbass eyes open to the reality of the situation. Jon visits Dany in the throne room. Dany is still in love with him for some reason. I think I missed the time travel arc in this season or something. I don't know. Jon kills Dany. Drogon finally makes an artistic statement. Fast forward, all the rich people are in the same area and will continue to decide what is best for the remaining 12 people in King's Landing. Tyrion chooses the boy who lived as king of the realms, and everyone but the people who know him best agree. Sansa becomes the queen of the north. Bran punishes Tyrion by making him one of the most powerful people in all the kingdoms. Jon is being sent to the Night's Watch just to make sure the snow is well groomed for vacationing lords. Unsullied are taking their ball and going home. The Starks say goodbye to Jon. Arya is Marco Poloing to the west. Brienne adds feats to Jaime's resume. The small council meets, and man, aren't these guys just a bunch of cut-ups? And Jon is probably just going to stay beyond the wall forever. Game over.
Oh.
That's it. That's all.
Yeah.
So
That's all.
yeah. Yeah. So the winner is Bran.
Yeah.
I've always thought of him as such a loser, but I was wrong. He's a winner of the Game of
He's
Thrones.
still a loser.
Still a loser in my book.
Just, in a brief summary, Justin, how where are you feeling on this episode?
So how I feel is that these years of my life have been completely wasted. To put it bluntly, that's how I feel. Like I mentioned earlier that I feel like I said, well, let's just start back with season 1, episode 1, right from the very beginning, because to me, it like even though there's been some satisfaction to some of the story arcs that have happened, I feel like we've gone in a big circle. We've got like nothing has changed. That's basically how I feel. Like Jon is back up north. Like Starks are still in Winterfell. I mean, there's a Stark sitting on the throne now too, but kind of a worthless Stark. So I don't know. Like the scene at the end where they've got this small council together. Like it was just like, well, things are back to the way they were. I don't know. I just felt like all of the meaningful things that occurred became meaningless with the way that this ended. So, yeah. I'm not happy with how it ended at all.
Yeah. Would you say that, I guess, was that more because of kind of this season or the past couple seasons, or like, I guess, or is this episode itself just?
I think it's this episode itself. I'm trying to think. Like, I don't know. This season, there's a lot of people who are upset with how this season has gone. Clearly, we've got petitions to rewrite everything now at this point.
Which also, just a sidebar real quick, just fucking chill. Don't sign a dumbass petition. Like, here's the thing. There are some petitions that actually do bring about actual change in the world. Don't cheapen it by getting 1 million signatures on a Game of Thrones thing so that when we have to, like, fight actual forces of evil with a petition...
Yeah, people are going to stop taking positions seriously.
Yeah.
You assholes.
Kind of like Game of Thrones.
I'm just
Because, I
choose a
mean, the
different
guy
hill to
in
die
front of the
on.
concert venue who hands me a petition to cancel KFC back in 2003 that I only signed because he saw where I parked and thought he was going to vandalize my car. I love KFC, by the way. That petition didn't mean anything, but it meant
My
something.
signature.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
Game of
yeah,
Thrones.
yeah.
Game of Thrones to me is like it started out. The reason I fell in love with it is because things felt meaningful. There was permanence in this world, and now like all those things that were meaningful, like freaking King's Landing looks like it's been completely rebuilt within 2 weeks by the end of this episode. Like there's no permanent consequences anymore. At least that's how it feels. On the other hand, I was rooting up until the very last scene for a cut to Catelyn Stark, like eyes opening, being raised from the dead. So, like, I just had this hope that man, she's alive somewhere somehow, being brought back to life by the what are those people called that bring people back to life? I don't remember.
Yeah,
I'm a terrible fan.
priests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been holding out, but no, it didn't happen.
Man, I was hoping for a post-credit sequence where we saw Drogon just like throw Danny, like find some fire and just throw Danny's body into, hoping it would like revive her, but just like burns, and he's like, "Oh shit!" It's a post-credit zinger right there.
Yes, that it would be that. Yeah, I will say this episode for me actually is higher on the list of episodes I enjoyed this season, particularly because there were a couple scenes I really enjoyed. Tyrion was given a lot of play this episode, in some cases to better effect than others. I think his scene with Jon prior to Jon killing Dany is really incredible, and is like I think it could be put up against a lot of other great scenes in this show, and kind of hold up. And I mentioned this before. I think one of the major positives I can say about this episode is cinematography wise and just kind of general look wise, it's one of the best looking episodes of Game of Thrones, I think. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I think that for me, I finally realized over this last week, the thing that feels so different to me about these past 2 seasons of Game of Thrones versus the earlier seasons is the world no longer feels big. The last 2 seasons have made this world feel extremely small. And because of that, I feel like it's lost a lot of the gravitas. You know what I mean? In the first, I'll say 6 seasons, we had this massive world, and all of these interwoven, this spider web of stories that were not low stakes by any means, were high stakes, but they were smaller stories. They were very individual experiences that all the characters were having. And over the last 2 seasons, the world has just gotten smaller due to a lot of, I think, production decisions that we've talked about extensively as far as travel in this show is just, man, you're just opening the menu and scrolling through the list of cool cities you can go to. And also just, I feel like those character stories have really taken a hit. Because they're not given the time that they need at this point, and why a lot of this stuff falls flat. And that's for me, like, there's the plot stuff at the end of this. I actually like a lot of the choices they made, but they just don't hit me like they would have in season 4. You know, like, so I'm feeling really conflicted about the end, you know. But
I mean, I'm right with you on, if I'm interpreting this right, that like on paper, if you were to write out all the plot points of this season, at least 90% of them to me are great.
Right,
it's exactly where I want the, like, if you rewind a few seasons, like, oh, that's a wonderful place for us to end. Yeah, which is probably kind of how the writers saw it. You know, like the showrunners get certain points from George R. R. Martin, and they're like, okay, now we got to fill in the blanks and Apparently, we don't know how to do that super well.
Yeah, well, and I think that's the thing is like in season 4, you tell me these plot points. I'm like, I'm excited for those blanks. I'm excited to see what we do to get there. And it does kind of fall flat. So.
I did see someone mention, and I feel I agree with it. It's something that's been missing from the past couple seasons. Is we've talked about the show being a lot of people talking in rooms. We're missing a lot of. We see big events, but we don't see people talking about how those events make them feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't think of it in that way, but it worded out that way. I was like, yeah, that is what makes the show, like, those characters work. And it's one of the main ingredients of the show, and we're just not seeing it. We're just seeing a kind of event after event after event with a brief, like, almost like summary of what those conversations should be.
Right.
Which I think is why the Tyrion and Jon interaction might have felt a little bit more impactful, because that was like, it felt like a callback to how the show felt in the first few seasons.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Should we go through characters?
Yeah. Let's kind of talk through. Let's go ahead and talk about Dany.
Let's talk about our
star of the last episode, MVP. Uncountable number of kills racked up on the board. A KD unlike any we've seen in Westeros. Dany the Destroyer.
Hey, that's a pretty good name for it.
Yeah, Riley, how did you feel about Dany's stuff, at least at the end of this?
I think it was good. I felt good about her story kind of ending there, especially because after she destroyed a whole city and killed a bunch of innocent people, she was like, we're gonna do this all over the world now.
Yeah, she's kind of like she's a metaphor for America.
I
started off
honestly
with really great intentions, and then King's Landing was like, the Hiroshima, and from there on it's like, that Middle East looks pretty good.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, we've mentioned before the imperialistic tendencies of Dany, and I think like they kind of frame that in a really great way. I love what Tyrion says about that, about her specifically, because I think it enables Dany to maintain her humanity. Because like we kind of talked about the Mad Queen thing, which I think in some ways can do some disservice to that character. And like the way it was kind of at least put forward in this episode, it kind of maintains that for her a little bit, which I think will be important for some people who really love her in this show, which we know there's a lot of people who were very upset last week having to watch their hero murder a bunch of civilians. So yeah, that was interesting, and I think I liked it. I don't know. I'll have to sit on it longer. It's one of those endings I think, if nothing else, there's a lot to unpack there, and a lot of interesting conversations to have about it. So, yeah, I guess the biggest thing for me, and I want to know what everyone else feels about, is her relationship with Jon at that point.
Yeah, it's weird.
That's just another one of those things. Like, last week we talked about how the transition of her just snapping and killing tons of people. Yeah. I mean, it didn't work for me because I like the plot point. I like her going mad, but it just didn't. There wasn't the right amount of transition there. I feel it's the same kind of with their relationship, and the way you put it in the rundown was really good because it's like it feels like we missed something. And I felt that way even the past couple episodes with their relationship.
Yeah,
because honestly, I really like in season 7 Jon and Dany's beginning of their flirtation. But at the same time, it feels like something that's like, oh, this is something that's going to take like 3 seasons.
Right.
At the rate they're going with that, right?
Yeah.
So it just kind of stayed there, and then all of a sudden we were supposed to believe, oh, they're deeply in love to the point where Jon is like so conflicted.
Yeah.
And I don't buy it at all, and it robs that. It's a great moment of him stabbing her in the throne room that I appreciated for the plot point when we watched it, and it kind of did hit me a little bit of like, oh, this would, like, just thinking back on everything, like, wow, this is cool, and then being like, but it's cool, but I don't feel the gut wrenching. I don't feel the man.
There's like so much like potential in that moment that I feel like kind of just falls off a little bit. But yeah.
I don't know. What did you think, Justin? What did you think about Daenerys's Because, I mean, yeah, we didn't get your take on, like, her whole Mad Queen thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of going that into, that moment of her final moment.
Man, I don't know. I don't know what else I could really add to it. I've been pretty vocal about not really liking Amelia Clark's acting for a really long time, and I've been like, it's been hard for me to see, like, because I dislike her acting, it's like that interferes with my ability to really like see Daenerys as a character. I don't know. It's so like seeing her get stabbed is like cool. It's done. She's done now. But I mean, but at the same time, like I mentioned earlier that Daenerys in this episode tonight was actually like I actually enjoyed her more than probably anybody else in the episode. I mean, there were moments here and there with other characters that I really liked, but I thought she did a really good job. So I don't know. I don't have much more to add to it, I think.
Yeah, it's a weird thing, and I think that it's weird because I feel like she's been given some of the greatest moments in this season for me, like the feast at Winterfell, like her kind of the beginning of that turn of like the paranoia creeping into her is, I think, really subtly and beautifully done on her part. But it seems like scene to scene work gets redone or like just pulled up. So it was interesting. But yeah, so I think a very poetic, perhaps too poetic ending of the dragon just melting the throne. Mm-hmm. Cool. Great. And then I mean that's essentially all the stuff that happens in the first 30 minutes of this episode. I mean, you basically just kind of get the scene with Tyrion and Jon, and then them walking through the city and being like, "Yep, looks burned. Looks like dragon's been here." And Grey Worm, well, the Unsullied, sullied only by the lack of me giving a shit, I guess. Like I don't know that character. It's I don't know.
Well, while we're on it, this Grey Worm is my biggest gripe with this episode.
Okay,
as a standalone episode, even by itself, but even throughout his whole journey, he kind of has the same. His is a little more understandable because of his relationship with Missandei, of his kind of snapping.
Yeah,
but it seems like I don't know. Once again with Daenerys, it's like I love the snap. I think it went overboard a little bit to an unbelievable point at points.
Mm-hmm.
But my biggest gripe is, okay, apparently he's so diehard for Daenerys, then Jon kills her. Jon should be dead on the spot.
Yeah.
There's no reason, he should be taken prisoner. Okay, what if I wave that aside? Okay, I'll forgive that. Let's say he does take him prisoner. They go to this council, which is probably what we'll move on to next, of all the remaining lords of Westeros, which apparently still matters. And he's like, no, we're keeping our prisoner because he killed our queen. And they're like, how about no? And he's like, I'll entertain that thought.
Okay.
Like, very easily just
yeah.
goes along with it after being, like, very adamant. And
well, okay, but that's not the end, Tyler. That's not the last thing that happened. Because when Jon is being walked out to get on the boat to go north, they share a steely, like, gaze at each other. Like, it's a hard stare
never be able
by
to
all
wash that
accounts.
stare off of him.
And do you know, there's a lot said in that stare, and one of them is that we're not going to see these people together again ever. This is literally the last episode.
And then he says, we're going to go to the Isle of North. I'm going to find a replacement for Missandei. And, what are you going to do there?
I guess,
like, on the beach.
Yeah, like, Dany's dream lives on in the East. Just forced freedom for everyone. I don't know. Interesting.
Yeah, but, like, his acceptance of that and just, like, how strong it was presented of how he was like, I'm not going to budge, to very quickly just, like, respecting the authority of all these people that he doesn't give a shit about, and then being like, oh, whoever you pick as king, yeah, I'll totally be okay.
Yeah.
Get out of here. And then, unfortunately, a lot hangs on that, but, I mean, there's some great once again, plot points if we can just like move past that. And,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my biggest gripe.
Yeah, no, I totally see that. And it is like, I mean, they set him up. I mean, I feel like the setup and the build to this, it would totally make sense for him to do that. It seems like, to me, the trope that makes sense in my mind, and I don't want to tell writers how to do their job, but like, it feels like him seeing Missandei dead, like, that basically is the only thing he had. Like, that's the only good thing that he really had. And to me, it's like, that's a man who's just like chasing death at that point. Like, he will do anything he wants in the hopes that eventually that kills him and he is free, and he actually is free. And I don't know, to me, that's a better end for this character too. I don't know, but there's several ways you can read it. It was one that I think, for those same reasons, like, that was the read I jumped to of like, I'll just end it then. Like, have him do something that we can kill him over or something. I don't know. But yeah, so that was an interesting one. But yeah, let's talk about all these other fine lords and ladies, many of which we have not seen this season at all.
A couple of them, I don't think we've seen ever.
Yep. Yeah. The Dorn guy? Have we seen him?
We've never
Who's
seen the
that
Dorn
guy?
guy.
Okay.
And then there's another guy sitting by Lord Royce, I believe, that I don't think we've seen before on the very end.
The Sean Bean lookalike.
Yeah.
Oh, I honestly don't even remember. I
And
didn't notice
then
him.
there's
really.
another guy over by...
I was too busy looking at that
Sam.
breastfeeding kid.
Yeah, my eyes were on him the whole scene.
Young Ray Romano.
But yeah, so yeah, how did we feel about that scene?
Oh boy.
It's fine, I guess.
I mean, this seems very up and down for me.
Yeah,
There's a lot of forced humor, which sucked. Was really bad.
it's not
Yeah.
good. Well, and I feel like it's weird because I feel like just those things in the script are fine. Like, that's probably something you wouldn't catch on a read through, but once you see kind of the tone of, I mean, the first 30 minutes of this episode are slow. The camera moves slowly. The characters are walking slowly through everything. We finally got the travel down, like, times correct. Them walking from the gates of King Landing and like, yeah. And so then that stuff happens, and it feels wrong to laugh. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, they've put poor Samuel Tarly in a room full of a hostile audience for comedy at that point. That's not a room to do comedy in. And here he is trying to get his Type 5 in, and it's not working. But yeah, so that was a weird...
Like, when Edmure Tully stands up to start delivering things, that up until like the very last one, I was like, oh, he's going to be like, Sansa should be queen.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
That's
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
it's like, sit down. I'm like, okay. Like, the joke didn't read well, didn't transition well.
And then
like,
they held...
Smacks
really
his sword on the
awkward.
post as he turns around.
Yeah,
weird.
It was really weird.
It's like a Tim and Eric sketch or something. Like, the timing was odd. I don't know.
So that was really bad for me.
Yeah.
Once again, the Grey Room thing was bad. The good things, I feel like I mentioned earlier, I'm all on board Bran being the king, other than like, I don't know how to explain that any better than I did, I guess. Like, I love that idea. It just leaves a bit of a sour taste in your mouth. Like, the moment I think is great, other than the moment's great, and then it cuts to Bran and he's like, why do you think I traveled all this way? I'm like, fuck you. And I think that's a thing too, is you got to go back and be like, to the mistake of making Bran this soulless husk.
Yeah.
Of
for
like,
sure.
those moments would feel so much better if he had more of a conscience to him.
Yeah.
But I will say, like, once again, on paper, it's a great thing because I couldn't think of a good ending for Game of Thrones as far as like government wise.
For sure.
Like,
yeah,
the best option we had was, everyone's got their own city state type of thing, but even that feels like, that's still gonna be really shitty.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like if you have someone who's like just below omniscient, like that's probably the best thing you could hope for, right? So I think that was a clever way to do it. It just, yeah. But yeah, and then like so there's like cool moments in this scene for me, but then it's like immediately just undercut by stupid shit.
Yeah. Yeah, and we kind of already made fun of the stories being the things that tie us together. Like that's great. That's a great sentiment. It feels a little again. To me, it just felt a little saccharine. Like it's just
No, it's definitely
little too
masturbation in written form.
yeah. So but yeah, I think honestly, also I would have ridden hard for Davos's hand. Let Tyrion do whatever. I don't know. I don't know. And Davos is just doesn't get his due. He gets no respect. He gets some respect.
Yeah, what does he end up being? He's the master of ships, which makes sense.
Yeah. It makes sense.
It makes more sense than fucking Bronn being master of coin.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we're just back to. I mean, I will say the Davos thing. That's just judging a book by its cover. It's being like, you like boats, right? Look at all these boats. He's like, I've been on a boat for 35 fucking years, and that's mostly just because I fucked up. Like, I had to.
He's just gonna be running the black market of Westeros on those boats. Gonna be smuggling everything.
Yeah, so that was not that Davos being master of ships. That's great, but my boy deserves better. Yeah. I will die with that sentiment inside of my bones.
He was for me one of the most compelling actors.
Yeah.
On the show.
Oh yeah, I agree.
And I think all the way up until the end he was consistent. I'm pretty sure his actor. If I could be totally wrong on this, I want to say he's been slightly more vocal about his displeasure of the past few seasons, which I find interesting. But in other actors, you kind of see that, whereas in him, man's a pro.
Yeah,
you know, he just
it's true. Yeah,
and he's like, I hate this, but hey, and maybe he didn't. I might be misremembering, but yeah, he's fantastic.
Yeah, he's great. So yeah, I'm trying to think of the other moments in that. Yara.
Fuck Yara, man. I've heard a lot of love for Yara. I've never shared this sentiment. There's moments where I'm like, okay, I could maybe come around. She never quite got there for me.
Yeah.
And this episode, I'm like, Arya, just do it. Just please. Yeah. Like, there's a lot of things. And this isn't something they had to explain. It just bothers me a little bit. It's like, I mentioned earlier, where do the Iron Islands lie in the jurisdiction? Because they always were part of the North, technically. Mm-hmm. And so does Sansa rule them?
Well, it seemed like they would not be homies, so I'd imagine that she just, I don't know, or maybe they're their own thing. I don't know. Yeah, that was kind of left unclear. But she was still very much like, she killed our queen who killed all our people. And that is not okay with the Iron Islands, because we are rough.
I mean, Sansa needs a spouse, and men haven't really worked out for her.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, they've already got a history of kind of like the Iron. Like Theon's been living at Winterfell forever. Yeah. There's like that tie. So, yeah, sure, get him in the North, and
you rule your own kingdom, set your own laws. You know?
Yeah.
The fan fiction, it writes itself.
Oh no, I'm cribbing that just from that's saved. I have terabytes of saved pages to that.
Of just artwork for it.
Too bad Tumblr. Never mind. We'll just stop there.
Yeah, let's stop at Too Bad Tumblr, because what else is there to say? We all miss it. So I really again, yeah, I think this scene is what it is. I'm glad we get to see kind of everyone before the end of the season, because I think when they did leave the North, we all did have some questions as to whether we would see them again before some kind of like epilogue montage that shows them like
Academy Awards remembrance video at the end during the credits, fade in, fade out,
cross-fading their faces in every quadrant of the screen. Yeah, and so it was good to see them one last time. Kind of got some closure with Brienne and Jaime. Just cool. I think that's a fine end to tie up. She now has achieved what she's always wanted to be. She's the King's Guard for Bran. Yeah, for a Stark. Yeah, which is also pretty great. Also, Podrick. We see Podrick in all gold armor, which is adorable. It is what like I laughed when I saw it, but only because I was like, get it, dude. Good for you. Like, it's just truly, it's like he's not the best knight, but he works so damn hard.
But
like,
aren't the
good for him.
Kingsguard celibate?
Wow,
That's
I mean,
a crime.
are they? Is the Kingsguard celibate? I don't know if that. I don't know.
Or maybe it's just that they can't have one. I mean, the people who are celibate or sworn to celibacy never really,
Let's just say,
show,
I mean,
but-
Podrick not being able to have a wife is truly the greatest gift. Not tying him down to one person and letting him share as much as he wants. Yeah. So that was another good character ending. I guess we've kind of talked about. Is there anything else with those smaller characters that like stood out to you guys, or was of note that you enjoyed or particularly hated? Nothing.
Not really.
Yeah.
I'm a little like once again more confusion on like stuff of who's where and what jurisdiction, everything. Because like Brienne, I feel like is there at that one meeting of the election because she is the sole representative of Tarth. Is it Tarth?
Yeah.
Sapphire Isle.
Yeah.
She's sole representative of that. Someone else too that's also like the only representative, but then they get new positions, and it's like, okay, who is in charge of that now? I mean, that's nitpicky, doesn't matter,
Right.
but it's just a question in my mind of like, there's so many like, what is going on here?
Right. Yeah.
But yeah. That is the next thing, the small council meeting, or is there something in between that we're missing?
No, I think that's kind of it. We can kind of talk about the small
John gets
council meeting.
sentenced to...
Oh yeah, John is
John leaves.
getting sent to North.
Which is another thing that bothers me about Grey Worm. It's like, you don't think he's going to put two and together. It's like, oh, he's going to go to the north where his family is, that now is their own country. That can't go wrong. Like,
Yeah.
he's not an idiot. Gosh damn.
So yeah, it's whatever. That's an interesting. It's a weird ending for that character. I think it's. I mean, I think it's kind of fitting. I don't know. We'll talk about it when we get there. But yeah, the small council meeting again. Some monstrous swings at that elusive baseball of humor.
Yeah.
Tyrion. So Tyrion like straightening all the chairs, and then the first thing everyone does is just come and like really fuck him up, like really pull him out in a way that is displeasing to him. It's like weird. We didn't talk about Sam is the maester of King's Landing now.
Which, yeah, that was the one I was thinking of, because he's also the
Right.
only member of his house left.
True.
So it's like, well, the only leader of his house, the only highborn left. So it's
Yeah.
like he should be doing that, but
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, so I assume like his mom or sister would
Probably,
be doing that
yeah.
now? I don't know. But yeah, so I don't know. Anything to say about that meeting? It was longer than it needed to be.
Way longer.
Yeah. They tried to make us laugh and they didn't succeed.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brienne. No, we already mentioned she was captain of the King's Guard.
Yeah.
Yeah, way too much talk about like the brothels and the building of everything.
Yeah. Yeah, that stuck around like 4 or 5 beats too long. I was like, we get it. Like, just we get it. So yeah, I guess let's talk about the last things we see then.
Well, we have
sort
the
of
Stark
last
goodbye
things.
after that.
Yeah,
right, where
the
they-
Starks, and kind of those 3 endings. Just think, yeah, what else are you gonna end on? I feel like I don't know. Like, who else would you end on other than those characters that we've seen from the beginning, and
Right.
like, and that. So, talked a little bit about John. So let's just talk about him. Kind of he goes north to the wall, is immediately made Lord Commander, because who else is going to be it, I guess? And then also immediately leaves?
Well, I mean, that whole thing is confusing because it's like, he's like, there's still a Night's Watch. Yeah, there's got to be somewhere for bastards to go. It's like,
Like, what are
to
they
do
doing?
what?
So it's a bastard country club.
They're like, either you're sending them to prison or there's nothing keeping them there. They're all just going to come back down. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And that, like, I wish they would have even just changed something slightly, like, just exiled him to beyond the wall or something. Or,
Yeah.
like, anything like that would have been better, I feel like, than just leaving it so blank and unexplained.
Yeah. Yeah, it was weird. But Tormund was at the wall. Cool.
Just waiting for him, I guess, even though he said he was already going north of the wall.
Tormund's just, he's ride or die, man.
He's got a bro
there.
sense.
Yeah.
Did the big lady come with you?
That was pretty good Tormund.
It's better than mine. Mine was like Skeletor or something.
But yeah, he pets Ghost, which hopefully people finally shut up
But
about
here's the
now.
thing, they were like, he didn't pet him before because it's a CGI issue.
Yeah, they're like, it's not in the
It wasn't an
budget.
issue here now.
Well, you know,
Confusing.
they got a different dog for the CGI. The CGI dog they were using was getting pretty expensive, so they cut off one of it. They took one with one ear. That's actually why this dog is missing an ear. It's because it's cheaper.
They used
to
Danny's
get.
wig to like make the hair look real when he's touching it.
I'm not gonna need this anymore.
Oh, that'd be amazing. What a great fix. Thank you, production designer.
You are the true heroes.
Seriously, though, you really are on this show. Good for you. But yeah, so and then presumably the last shot we see of John, in my mind, basically says, he looks back at the gate, he's like, never going back there, basically. Like, he's out in the wild now, and it's probably the good place for him to stay forever. There's not really anything else left for him. He possibly could have his own, is it Aemon?
Yeah.
Maester Aemon moment with the next generation of Game of Thrones, where he's like, I'm a Targaryen who killed his sister, and they're like, holy shit! So I don't know, our kids might see that in 20 years when they do the next generation of,
Right.
With actual
Game of
old Kit
Thrones.
Harington. That'd be
Yes.
Oh man.
the saddest old man.
They pull him off the West End where he's just been doing a great theater forever. But yeah, so sure, that's a good ending for John. Like I feel like the big choice is him killing Danny. I think that's a good choice for him. I liked that. And yeah, let him go be in the snow. That's his name, you know,
Yeah.
it's right there in the title.
You ain't gonna find another Egret. All those wildlings look significantly worse.
Yeah. But who knows if spring does come beyond the wall? And-
Face wash.
yeah, there you go.
That comes out in spring.
Yeah.
So,
Those flowers are blooming.
Justin, you mentioned, I think maybe I read this wrong, that you were kind of bummed where it kind of just ends where it starts off. So how do you feel about John ending up there?
Well, like, I think it just goes back to, like, I want, like, a progression with my characters, and I feel like John went through all this stuff, and he's just, like, I don't know, it just leaves, it doesn't feel conclusive to me. I don't know. But then again, maybe that's the right thing for him, too. Like, I don't have any issues with, like, John's ending, I think. I don't know. It's just this big circle of...
Just something that could be more satisfying, maybe?
Yeah.
Missed opportunity?
Well,
But at the same, like, I don't know how to fix it either. Like,
Yeah.
there's something that I want, but I don't know what it is.
I feel like they've relied a little bit too much on the, like, circling around back to right where we were. Like, we did that with Jamie, too.
yeah.
Like,
Well, I think the difference with John though is that
his was
John,
better for sure.
and he never wanted really anything to do with the life that was for him south of the wall. You know what I mean? Like, and we've seen that for better or for worse, everything has been forced upon him this whole show. Like he's always been the reluctant person. I mean, he's that reluctant hero or whatever. And I really do feel like Beyond the Wall is where he belongs. You know what I mean? The wildlings, like, really, in my mind, became his people.
Yeah.
And so for me, it does feel like the ending for him rather than I don't know, than some clean thing is basically just he's going somewhere where he won't have to kneel. You know what I mean? It's kind of that going back to the whole Mance Raider thing and stuff. There is a place where you don't have to kneel. You don't have to deal with this bullshit. And so to me, I guess that's how I read it with him. But yeah.
Yeah, I guess I can see that. I don't know. It's just a symptom of the entire season where I feel like there's just more that I want that isn't fleshed out enough, and it just leaves me feeling empty, and the conclusions just aren't as satisfactory as I feel like they should be, because there's just so much more that I feel like we should have gone through to get to these points.
Yeah.
We didn't. Yeah. I gotta think about it some more.
Sure. No, but I see what you're saying for sure. All right, well, let's move on to the other super exciting endings. Riley, how'd you feel about Arya's ending?
It was okay. It left it open, which I like. Like, I like us not getting, like, a concrete, this is what Arya's doing. Because I feel like with her, she's gonna decide what she's doing when she gets to where she wants to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's kind of cool. I don't know. It's weird that she's, like, just sailing into oblivion, though. Like, that she...
Yeah.
Like, no one knows what's going on over there.
Yeah, who was with her on that ship?
Exactly,
Did we see?
that's what I was
Okay,
saying.
that's...
Like,
yeah.
Yeah, there's just a bunch of dudes on that boat with her, so...
I didn't see anyone on that boat with her. Did you?
Oh, there were people. Like, a
that's
guy
what I
walked
was
by
trying to
her with a
remember.
barrel, and,
Okay.
like, there were
Okay.
people, like, moving about.
So that last
but-
shot from the ship, I was like trying to look back. I was like, no,
Oh.
that's a big ship for one person to man by themselves. Like,
Oh,
She's using all those faces to...
yeah, I mean, I
Man
will
on things.
say they really, for me, really fucked that up, because if that guy with a barrel walked by her
and it was
and then
jacking.
she said something, and he turned
Yes.
around and just pulled off the face of a grizzled
Yes.
sailor to reveal it was Jackin the whole time. That would have been the last button I really would have loved in this show. Yeah, I mean, I do think that hopefully within the next few months we'll have everyone's Jackin supercut of this entire series, because that's really what we deserve as people at this point, is to just have that kind
I
of.
mean, they could have kind of Sopranosed it, and like, that's the last shot of just Arya, and she reaches up to pull off her face, but it cuts before we see who it is, and that's the end of Game of Thrones.
Oh man. That would have made up for a lot of shit this season if that is the shot they decided to go out on. Holy shit. Yeah. So she's going west, because who knows what's out there. Cool.
West of
Yeah.
West.
Like, okay.
Yeah.
What's west of Westeros?
Flat Earthers are like, see,
There's just a cliff and a huge turtle underneath it.
George R. R. Martin knows.
Yeah, and then we have Sansa, which she puts on a super fly dress.
She got what she wanted? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think
so.
Yeah, that's what she wanted.
It's kind of a bummer for me, because we talked about this season. I feel like has been some of redemption writing wise for her, even though, like, once again, don't like how she got there. This episode felt very like, oh, Sansa's still that petty, like, and maybe that's not what they intended, but that's how it read to me, was like, oh, I'm not the one getting the votes. Well, I'm gonna take the North then.
Yeah,
because
it's weird.
like,
It's definitely weird.
I like her being the ruler of the North, the Warden of the North, and I just don't like how they did it. It felt like that is very much Sansa, almost like from season 1.
Yeah,
like,
I feel like there's a stronger choice to make there. And I mean, I feel like they get like halfway there with her explaining why there needs to be that in the North. But yeah, it doesn't bring it home in a way.
For me, it was like, well, if a Stark is the king, then wouldn't they be more like willing to kneel? I don't know.
But he can't walk.
He can't bear
You
children.
gotta kneel so
gotta
low.
kneel.
The Northerners, they got bad knees.
Yeah, it's cold.
cold.
It's bad for the joints.
I saw something. It was, the chaos is a ladder, and like now it's a ramp.
Did you make that up, or is that
No, it was just on Reddit. Like it's just posted on Reddit after the show.
Good for them.
Shout out to you / I don't remember, but whoever came up with that.
Rim job, Steve.
Yeah, 69 420.
Well, cool. Yeah, I mean that's that episode, right?
It,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's it.
Anything
Yeah,
we missed?
then just long repeated montages of them.
People walking out of doors.
Yeah.
Staring into the
It's another one of those
distance.
ones that felt like the montage was over, music paused for a bit,
Yeah.
and then it started back up for another long run,
Yeah.
which they've done once earlier in this season. That was ugh.
Yeah. I guess. So that's it. That's Game of Thrones. It's over. Well, I mean, the real ending is
Yeah.
waiting to be written. I don't know. Like, whatever.
I mean, I
wanna
imagine-
decide that is.
I mean, who knows at this point with what he's doing?
Yeah.
But I mean, like, and this is kind of the big theory on the internet is like, this last couple episodes are going to be very similar to the book. Just getting there will be better.
Interesting.
But no one knows shit. Like,
Yeah, right.
So it's like, I mean, I could totally see that, and I wouldn't hate that because I like a lot of the things they did.
Right.
But yeah, I'm excited, but I know, like, even when Winds of Winter comes out, I'm not going to read it because I know it's going to be forever until Promise of Spring or whatever it's called comes out, and I'm like, I need both of them,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then at that point I'll probably have to like reread because there's a lot of things in the books that aren't in the show, so it's like I'll forget like who the hell is this? Like,
Yeah.
there's a whole nother Targaryen in the books.
Oh.
There's that comes in like book
Steve?
like Tyrion. So Tyrion, after he kills his
Steve
father,
the Targaryen.
after Tyrion kills his father, he
Jump
goes.
for those trees.
I didn't know
Sorry.
I didn't know that's what you were singing. And
I
yeah.
at first thought you were making a Dave the
I
Barbarian
did too.
reference. Which is a shitty cartoon on
Yeah.
Disney Channel
It was so bad.
9 years ago.
I thought you were making your own show and then turned into George of the Jungle. Watch out for that dragon. But yeah, he comes in. Tyrion, after he kills Tywin, goes to the east and he's going to go to meet. But we get that like that journey's a lot longer in the book, and he's with a whole different group of characters. One of them's like a red priestess, and one of them is just this boy, and you don't know who he is at first, and then it's revealed later that he's like Dany's younger brother or something. Like I can't remember his actual name. And then at some point, like he's on his way to meet with Daenerys, I believe, also. But then all this shit happens, and she's ending up like going to leave, and he's like, "Well, there's Golden Company. Let's go get them." And then we don't hear from him in the next book. We just hear that armies are attacking like the south of Westeros, and it's the Golden Company. And then so like that whole thing has yet to be
Like resolved.
yeah. So it's a whole huge piece that's just missing from the show, which honestly when I read it I was like not sure how I felt about it. I'm like, this feels late in the game to bring up, but I mean, four more books of 1,000 pages each, maybe that's enough to make that work.
Yeah.
But
Right.
For sure.
But yeah, I definitely want to read them. I'm excited for them, but I'm definitely holding my excitement back for a
Yeah.
long time.
Yeah. Yeah. It feels weird that it's over.
It's probably like the biggest TV moment in a long time.
Yeah.
Like
For sure.
since Lost or The Sopranos is all I can think of. Like
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of anything bigger.
Yeah, I mean those, and yeah, definitely like volume of people. I think it's far and away biggest TV events of our lifetimes.
Okay, yes. I was about to say, random thought, wasn't the MASH finale like one of the biggest television events in history?
I'd assume, yeah.
Yeah,
I think it had like the highest ratings up to that point.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, I thought you were gonna go with something like. I don't know, wow, I just lost the show. I was gonna say it was a good joke. Let's pretend I said a good joke there.
insert good joke show, whatever that means to you. But here we like to personalize the jokes and let you do the legwork on them.
I like to make sure I'm batting even. You know, perfect, flawless. Bowling strike, other sports
a bowling
references,
strike.
covering all my bases to please the whole crowd.
Yeah. So, I guess any final thoughts on the series as a whole from everyone? That's a really broad thing, so I don't know.
Yeah, I think
people have
that's a good
stuff,
thing to do. Those round robin and just like not necessarily because we already kind of talked about how we feel about the ending, but just kind of the whole series, highs, lows. Riley, you want to start us off?
Okay.
Or if you want to go, if you want to wait, we can. I mean, I can start so that people have more time to think. Man, Game of Thrones. I met at a very young age, and I was on the streets. I was doing things that my mom wanted to be proud of just to get by. But then Game of Thrones came on and I realized, wow, there are shittier people in the world than me. This show's going to give me hope. No.
Did you really think it was in this world, too?
Wait.
Oh, shit.
I thought this was a documentary. No, came late to the party a little bit. Not as late as you, obviously.
Yeah.
But people were just talking about it.
Definitely book late.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who didn't? Yeah. Binge the first 2 seasons really quick, like I've said before, and like honestly, favorite show. That first 2 seasons, I was like, this is hands down my favorite thing that's been on TV, and I still think it holds up for me. I rewatching this series before this season, my wife and I did it, and I was like, man, the things this show did are just really good. The balls it took to like do some of the things in this show.
The literal balls.
That I saw.
Yeah.
Yeah, just really good. Taking a fantasy story, like fantasy setting, but just writing like a mafia story in it, like was beautiful. I loved it, and I still love it. And I think, as much crap as the 2 showrunners are getting, I think they did an excellent job adapting the books they had, and the changes they even made during the stuff that was covered by books. The changes they had to make. I'm like 95% of the stuff, I was like, that is a smart change. The Hound Brienne fight is like one of the highlight moments of the show for me, and that's a change from the books. And that's something that they were smart enough to do and put together. And yeah, that is one of my the Hound's honestly in a lot of my highlighted moments. He's probably my highlighted character.
Yeah.
I'll say the Hound was like one of my top 3 characters. He's the one that sticks out in my mind as like smaller characters that are just larger than life. And favorite quote I'll go with, I can't even quote it perfectly, is just that whole thing. I was like, if any more words come out of your cunt mouth, I'm going to have to eat every chicken in this room. And the fact that you can say that and have it be simultaneously like funny, but also like really tense in that scene. Really great stuff. I want to give a shout out to my homie, Sean Bean, who just kicked this show off with a bang and brought that gravitas to this show that, you know, we kind of lost in some of the latter seasons a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, great show. Unfortunately, it had to like kind of sizzle out instead of going out with like a huge bang, and kind of lost its identity along the way. But I mean, overall, there's more phenomenal seasons than there are bad seasons of Game of Thrones, so I still consider it a fantastic show.
Cool. Justin?
Me next?
Yeah.
So Game of Thrones is going to be like, I feel kind of weird doing this because like I've only been a guest on the show, but now I get to say like I have a final word here.
We're putting you in the annals.
All right. Game of Thrones is like, this is the first TV show that I have watched that I've gotten this involved with, I think, and that has captured me for so long, obviously, because it's taken forever. So, like, this will be something that I look back on fondly for the rest of my life. Absolutely. It's one of the first shows, it's one of the few shows that my wife and I have watched completely all the way through together. So that's, like, kind of cool. And then also, just the whole time of my life where I watched it and a bunch of personal stuff I was going through. I don't know, it's kind of a big deal in my life to be involved in Game of Thrones just to begin with. So I would say, like, I started off tonight saying that I hate it and I regret watching it or whatever is wasting my life. That's not true. That's not true. Game of Thrones is pretty great. And I think that once I have a day or two to process things, I'll probably be mostly satisfied with how things turned out. Yeah. You mentioned the Hound as your favorite character, right? You said favorite?
Arguably, but definitely in contention.
Littlefinger was mine, and I wish that he would have been able to stick around for more of the ending of the show, because I think having him involved with the conclusion to the story might have been kind of, I don't know if that would be possible, but he was one of my favorite characters. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Cool. Game of Thrones is great.
Yeah, it sure is. I think so. Obviously being 9 years late. Whatever.
I realized as I said, I was a little late to the party. I was like, that doesn't fucking mean anything to the two people sitting next to me.
I showed up and I was like, there was a party here?
You're here for cleanup duty, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna fix all this fucking problems. No, I had a great experience watching Game of Thrones. I think I'm glad I watched it when I did. I'm kind of glad that I got to be a part of this last season, but also I watch a lot of TV, and especially at this point, it's there's not much stuff that I will commit to watch every week for years and years. But I really did love Game of Thrones. It's one of those things that was it was hyped endlessly for me before watching it. And in most ways it lived up to that hype. I think for me, the first 4 seasons will be, are especially dear to me just because, like you were saying, they had the guts to go for it and then stick the landing on almost all of it in those early seasons. And the intricacies of it, I'll say the things I love about Game of Thrones were the caliber of people they got to play characters in this show. Honestly, for me, thinking back on favorite characters that I have seen in this show, Catelyn Stark is really up there, performance-wise and character-wise. Also, everyone that's listened to more than one episode of the show knows I love Cersei and Lena Headey. But even Stannis Baratheon, Tywin Lannister, there's some really powerhouse performances in this show. And I think for me as an audience member, I want to go back and watch those early seasons because I'm wondering if their plot isn't as tight as I remember, because I definitely am the type of person that if an actor can invoke an emotional response for me, I'm likely to forget little plot points that might not be picked up. And that was, I think, the beginning of this show. Just the performances really blew me away, and to have an ensemble cast that is that strong, that many amazing actors to work on one show is really incredible. So but yeah, it's been really fun to be a part of kind of in real time everything over the last 6 weeks as we've kind of wrapped up. And it hasn't been the smoothest exit into that good night, but it was good enough, I think. So I'm excited to revisit Game of Thrones in a little while. I've definitely watched enough Game of Thrones in the last 4 months, so I'll be excited to come back to it later. But yeah, I loved it. I had a great experience.
Yeah.
So.
I like Game of Thrones. I think starting it, because I started it not knowing that I was going to be a part of this, and so I watched the first 2 seasons really, really fast, and so those kind of blurred together for me, but I was so obsessed with it that I had to watch it so fast. But then being able to kind of slow down and kind of get more into the intricacies of all their relationships and everything was super cool. I think the highlights of the show for me were honestly the road trip vibes, Arya and the Hound and Brienne and Jaime were probably my favorite parts of the show, just because you got to see so much character development over that time with 2 characters that shouldn't have gotten along as well as they did. So yeah, I loved that. I loved how they were able to kind of make you feel for characters that you were supposed to hate and hate characters that you loved. They did a really good job of really just messing with your emotions. And they kept me guessing. Even when I thought, like, oh, this is what's going to happen, they did it in a different way than I was anticipating, which was always really fun. And yeah, I really enjoyed watching it, and I want to rewatch it again, but it will be a while because there's been a lot of it in my life.
Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah.
Yeah, we'll have Mitchell record something for this too, because
that sucks. We don't get
definitely.
it.
Yeah, it would feel very incomplete not to have Mitchell's thoughts on kind of the end of this.
It's officially 4 a.m, but here are my final thoughts on Game of Thrones. I had a lot of thoughts. Maybe I should do a podcast about it. I don't know. That was a joke. I'm quite happy. I think for what has happened over the last 2 seasons, it ended about as well as it could have. There are some beats that I think would have worked better with a lot more, like the fact that the show treated Bran and Supernatural like a minor thing, and I think George will bring that together a lot better. But it does make sense in a lot of ways, and it was a lot of fun. The murder of Dany was lovely, but again, a little sudden. I wanted more people to die in general. I love that there was just some people talking and quite a bit of comedy at the end. There were some post-apocalyptic feels that were a little bit 300-esque in how bad the graphics were. We got a goodbye to Ghost. Pretty much everyone's ending was fairly satisfying for me. A little crazy that some of those random people, like we got Aaron Robin back for some reason. That was weird. Okay, that's my thoughts on the episode. I'm sure I'm missing the vast majority of them, but well done. She was so good and evil, and it went a good way. I mean, a lot of the things we predicted, who actually ended up ruling, is a little off base for what he's been. Anyway, sorry, I'm talking in circles. Game of Thrones has been really important to me over the last 5 years. Plus, as I read the books, got addicted to the show, re-binged it, it's definitely one of the most important pieces of fiction in my adult life. In this fantasy world, it does storytelling like nobody else. And again, things like Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, those were part of my childhood, and I love them dearly. But Thrones is something I really hope George stays alive to finish for a more fulfilled ending. But I did enjoy this finale, and I thought it brought it together as well as it could have. And I did enjoy watching it all the way along, and I will re-binge it. I think it absolutely, regardless of what happened at the end, did things that nothing else on television ever has done, and I don't know if anything ever will, because the only reason Thrones could fail is because it was built up to be so incredible. So other people will match the spectacle and maybe even the length, but the true depth and the elements of just absolute masterful storytelling, I don't think will be matched. So I stand for the Thrones. I have a Throner for life. Very happy to have gotten to talk about it with my friends on a podcast as well. I look forward to the spinoff. I hope for more books. But onwards and upwards to more awesome stories. Twin Peaks.
Well, that's it.
Yeah.
It's the closest the chapter on Game of Thrones for now until books come out, or there's at least one series that is for sure happening, right?
Yeah.
The other ones are still a little up in the air, but
Prequel material, is that what it's
Like
supposed to
I
be?
think
very
so.
prequel,
Yeah.
like thousands of years. I think.
Oh, okay.
yeah. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that stuff turns out. To keep us busy between now and then, how
We're going to
about
work on Bloodborne Game of Thrones crossover where Bran clones himself and becomes all of those crazy wheelchair guys in Bloodborne. Because I just want to see that. I just want to see Bran with a machine gun.
That's where he goes when he wargs. He's just playing online video games.
He's invading other hunters' worlds.
But yeah, we're gonna watch Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
Probably starting next week. We're ironing out details, but within the next couple weeks, we'll start watching Twin Peaks, which is my favorite show of all time. And man, I can't wait. It's gonna be a real whiplash transitioning into Twin Peaks from Game of Thrones. So bring your neck braces. But it'll be fun. And yeah, so we'll have new episodes. We're gonna start with our first episode. Will just cover the pilot. So if you want to watch along with us, please do. It'll be a blast. And we also, now that we've finished Game of Thrones, we finally got an email and a Twitter. It's our email is rewatchersonthepod@gmail.com, and our Twitter handle is rewatchersonthepod. So follow us, email us, whatever. I don't know. This is just a formality.
Fucking do it.
Do it! Just do it!
Shia LaBeouf endorsement. He's the sponsor of this episode.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, so we'll be back in 1 to 2 weeks with a completely different vibe. But thanks for listening, and hope you enjoyed Game of Thrones. Had a good finale, and we'll see you
Now
soon.
our watch has ended.
Oh, goodbye.
Bye.